Okay, so today we'll see how to define a variable in C Sharp environment and how to write a simple program in C Sharp environment. So as we discussed in the last class, when you talk about a variable declaration should be defined like this. When you talk about the syntax, if you look into variable declaration, it contains four different parts. They are going to be access specifier, data type, variable name is equal to value. As I said, whenever you declare any variable, any data member, you should also define the scope of data. How to define a scope? A scope can be defined using access specifier. As we discussed yesterday, C Sharp is providing different types of access specifiers. They are private, protected, internal, protected internal, and public. So based on your requirement, so you'll have to define scope of your data. You should tell the system whether particular variable should be accessible to only your class or outside of the class or within the assembly, outside of the assembly. Okay, so that kind of scope should be defined at the programming level. So while designing each and every data member, so it is mandatory that you should also define the scope of each and every data member. And the second part is data type. You should also tell the system how much amount of memory has to be allocated to store your data. So that memory allocation depends upon your data type. You should tell the system where your data is going to be integer. If it is integer, it is going to be into 16 or into 32 or into 64. Where it is a string, character. So you should tell the type of data. So based on the data type, so system will allocate only that much amount of memory to your location. And the next one is variable name. So it is a user defined one. You can give any name, any meaningful name. Is equal to value. Value is optional. If you want to assign some value at the time of declaration, you can. Otherwise, you can leave it blank. So blank can also be accepted. So whenever you want to define a variable, you should take care of these four parts. What is the scope of this data? What is the type of this data? And what is the name of your memory location? And what kind of data has to be stored into that particular location? So these four things are to be defined during your variable declaration. So let's see some examples. Access specifiers. So as I said, we have different types of access specifiers: private, protected, internal, protected internal, and public. You should tell the system whether it is private, public, or protected. So in my scenario, I want this data should be accessible to each and every class, each and every library. So I don't want to put any restriction. So that is the reason I would like to consider this particular variable as public. First, specify your access specifier, scope of your data, public. Next, data type. I want to store some number. That's why your data type is going to be into 60. Next, variable name. It can be anything. It is a user defined one. You can give A, B, C, blah, blah, blah. A is equal to some value. If you want to assign the value at the time of declaration, you can. Is equal to 123. C, access specifier, it is public. Data type, it is into 16. Variable name, it is A, is equal to value. Next, second scenario. In the second scenario, I'd like to restrict the access scope of my data member. Since it is an account number, that is the reason I don't want to expose these details to other classes. I want my data should be accessible to only my class. So if something has to be, the access of any data has to be limited up to class level, then it should be defined as private. That's why I am declaring it as private. Access specifier is private. Data type is int. Is there any data type called int in C Sharp? As per our discussion, as I said, when you talk about integer, We have only three categories in integer: int 16, int 64, int 16, int 32, and int 64. There is no data type called int, right? So if I define it as int, will it be accepted by the compiler? Guys, yes or no? Because there is no specific data type called int. We have seen only three categories in int, right? Int 16, int 32, int 64, right? So you should define, whenever you want to store an integer value, it should be defined as either int 16 or int 32 or int 64. But here I define it as int. Will it be accepted? Yes. Yes. Even if there is no data type called int, first time C# has provided this facility. Yes, still you can define integer as int. There is no class called int. There is no class called int, but still you can define it as int. So what will happen? Internally, this will be pointed to int 32 data type. This is very important question. Actually, your integer should be defined as either int 16 or int 32 or int 64, but still you can define it as int. If you define it as int, immediately it will be pointed to int 32 data type. So your int is nothing but int 32. This is very important question. What is the equivalent data type of int? It is int 32. So here, once you define anything as int, internally it will be pointed to int 32 data type. So int is nothing but int 32. So there is no special data type called int, but still, because in C, C++, we used to define all integers as int, right? That is regular practice. So that is the reason. So C# has provided this keyword. It is not a class. They just provided this keyword. Once you define it as int, immediately it will be pointed to int 32. So the equivalent data type of int is int 32. So instead of defining it as int 32, you can just write a short form called int. This is a short form of int 32. Okay. So access specifier, data type, next variable name. You can give any name, any meaningful name. Let's say I would like to store account number. That is the reason I'm just giving it as AC number. Otherwise you can write it as account number, any name, any meaningful name. Here see, I'm not assigning any value. So as I said, your value is optional. You don't have to provide this value at the time of declaration. It can also be provided later. It can also be overridden later from any method, from anywhere, from any class, right? So if you want, you can provide it. If you don't want, you don't have to provide it. You can leave it blank. Next, in one of the scenario, I'm going to define a variable. I want that data should be accessible to one of my relative class. The data should be accessible to one of my relative class. As we discussed yesterday, where the scope has to be extended up to your relative level, then protected will come into the picture. If some data has to be accessible to your class as well as your relative class, that data should be defined as, the scope of the data should be defined as protected. Once you define anything as protected, it will be accessible to your class as well as your relative class. Access specifier, I'm defining it as protected. Data type, I'm going to store my name. So name will have collection of characters. If you are going to store collection of characters, it should be defined as string. So my data type is string. Next, name of the variable is full name. Next, actually, whenever you are defining your variable, these three things are mandatory: access specifier, data type, and variable. Value is optional, but these three are mandatory. See, in last scenario, I'm just defining data type and variable name, but I didn't specify the access specifier. Will it be accepted? Yes, it will also be accepted. See, if you don't specify any access specifier, actually, as I said, This is a primary responsibility of developer, that every developer should specify scope of each and every data member. That is mandatory. But if you don't specify any access specifier, still it will be accepted. But if you don't specify any scope of your data member, by default, it will be considered as private data member, so that the scope will be limited up to only your class level. If you don't specify any scope of your data member, by default, it will be considered as private, so that the scope will be limited up to only your class level. So the default access specifier in C# is private. The default access specifier in C# is private. Any questions, guys, so far?
No, Ravindra garu.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Good. So I hope now you understood the variable declaration. Okay. Okay. Now we can start writing, some basic examples using C#. In the first class, we have discussed different types of .NET applications, right? There we have discussed like how to implement a Windows-based application and what technology has to be used to implement a web-based application, distributed application, and MVC application, and console application. So as I said, when you talk about a console application, console is very powerful environment. Everything can be implemented in the console. If you are really good in the console, you could also develop your own programming language like C# and Java. So that is the power of console. So now we are going to choose console application platform to implement and execute all C# concepts. As I said, it is very powerful environment. There's a reason you should be aware of all console environment related things. If you're really good in console, you can implement anything. Okay, so that is the reason. So we are going to choose console application platform to implement and execute all our C# concepts. So we'll be learning all C# concepts under console environments. Okay, so let's move towards the next concept, that is operators. Operators. What is the operator? Whenever you want to perform any operation, any mathematical operations, between two or more values, you would be needing a comment to perform that operation. So when you talk about an operator is a comment which performs mathematical operation between two or more values. Now we will see how to perform different types of mathematical operations in C#. When we talk about operators in C#, we have different types of commands support provided in C# to perform different types of mathematical operations. The command is called as an operator. When we talk about an operator, C# has provided different types of operator supports. If you look into that, the first and important operator is going to be arithmetic operators. Arithmetic operators. Basically, when you talk about arithmetic operator, it is used to perform all types of arithmetic operations. What is arithmetic operation? The basic mathematical operations like addition, subtractions, multiplications, and divisions. These are called arithmetic operations. Whenever you want to perform any arithmetic operation between two or more values, then you would be needing arithmetic operators. When you talk about arithmetic operators, the first operation is going to be addition. Which command will take care of performing the addition? That is going to be plus. If you write plus between two values, it will take care of performing addition between those two values. Example, a plus b. What plus will do? Plus is a operator. It is a command which will take care of adding these two values, left side value and right side value. Next, how to perform subtraction? For subtraction, you will have to use minus. Example, A minus B. How to perform multiplication? We have another command called star. Example, A into B. How to perform division? See, when you add two values, you will get only one result. When you subtract two values, there also you will get only one result. When you multiply two values, that also gives only one value. But coming to division, when you divide one value with another value, you will get two different values. Those are going to be quotient and remainder. In case of every division operation, you'll always get two different values. Those are going to be quotient and remainder. So that is the reason to support division operation, it has provided two different operators, slash and modulus. Slash and modulus. If you use slash, it gives quotient. If you use modulus, it gives remainder. Example, if you say A slash B, here it gives only quotient. If you use A modulus B, it gives only remainder. So if you're looking for remainder, you have to use modulus. If you're looking for quotient, you have to use slash. Let's say the best example is, if I ask you to find out an even or odd number, how do you find out, how do you decide whether that number is even or odd? So in order to decide the nature of the number, what has to be done? So you have to divide the number with 2 and check its remainder. So in this operation, you don't require quotient. Your operation is, the final result is going to be decided based on the remainder of the operation, right? So to decide whether the number is even or odd, so what you need to do, you have to divide that number with 2 and check its remainder. So finally we are looking for only remainder. So in that case, to get the remainder, there you have to use modulus, not slash. So based on your requirement, you'll have to choose the respective operator. So this is something about your arithmetic operators. Let's move towards the next one. That is relational operators. Relational operators. When you talk about a relational operator will define the relation between two values. A relational operator will define the relation between two operators. Basically, this will be used to compare two values. What is that comparison? The comparison can be less than, it can be greater than, it can be less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, is equal to, not equal to. I would like to know which one is, let's say there are two values A and B. Which one is small and which one is big? I would like to know whether A is smaller or B is smaller. In this case, to define the relation between these two, you'll have to use less than. Example, A is lesser than B. It will compare A value with B. It will compare A value with B, finally returns a Boolean value. If A is really less than B, I mean, if the condition is true, here we are checking whether A is less than B or not. If A is really less than B, it returns true, otherwise it returns false. So the final outcome of this operation is going to be a Boolean value. It can be either true or false. If this condition gets satisfied, it returns true, otherwise it returns false. If A is really less than B, it returns true, otherwise it returns false. Next, greater than. Here we are checking where A is greater than B or not. If A is really greater than B, it returns true, otherwise it returns false. Next, less than or equal to. A is less than or equal to B. Let's say A is equal to 11, B is equal to 10. Is A is less than B? No. Let's say A is equal to 10, B is equal to 10. Is A is less than B? No, A is equal to B. That's why I'm saying A is less than or equal to. If A is less than or equal to B, it returns true. If it is greater than B, it returns false. Next, greater than or equal to. Next, is equal to. We're just checking where both A and B are equal or not. Where A is equal to B or not. So to compare two values, to compare the equality, you'll have to use double is equal to. Yeah. Not equal to. Where A is not equal to B. If A is really not equal to B, it returns true. Otherwise, it returns false. So these are called a relational operator. A relational operator will always define the relationship between two values. Any questions, guys, so far? Oh, next, assignment operator. Assignment operators. Coming to assignment operator category, we have only one operator is available under this category, that is equal to. So whenever you want to assign a value to any variable, whenever you want to assign some data to any variable, whenever you want to store something into any variable, then your assignment operator will come into the picture. Using assignment operator, you can assign a value to any variable. Example, A is equal to 10. There is a location called A in the memory. It is empty. Now I would like to keep some value into that location. So how do you store that value into location? So using assignment operator. A is equal to 10. And there is one more variable, full name. I'd like to store some full name into this. So using is equal to, using assignment operator, you can assign any value to any variable. And next one is logical operators. Logical operators. What is the use of a logical operator? So basically, whenever you want to validate multiple conditions at a time. For example, when it comes to government recruitment, job recruitment, before accepting his profile, first you need to validate certain criteria. Like, as per the requirement criteria, age should not exceed 35 years and he should be a graduate, right? You need to validate multiple conditions. First, you have to check where his qualification is equal to graduation or not. Qualification should be graduation and age should be less than or equal to 35. You need to validate more than one condition before accepting his profile. So whenever you want to validate more than one condition, then you'd be needing logical operators. So later we'll see more about it. When we talk about logical operators, those are going to be and, or, not, and, or, not. Okay, let's say A should be greater than B and B should be greater than C. Then only proceed with your action. If both are satisfied, both the conditions are satisfied, then only proceed with your action. Otherwise, don't proceed. In our previous scenario, E should be a graduate and his age should not be greater than 35. Then only should accept his profile. If anyone is not satisfied, if he is not a graduate or his age is greater than 35, then don't accept his profile. Right? So when multiple conditions are to be satisfied, then you should use AND. Next, R. If any one of them is satisfied, then go ahead, proceed with the action. Let's say coming to reservation. Either if his age is greater than 35, then he should belong to some reservation category. If he's a reservation category or age is greater than 35, then accept his profile. If he's not in a reservation category and age is greater than 35, they don't accept his profile. If you want to give any exception, in that case you can go for R. Let's say I'm writing two conditions. If any one of these two is satisfied, yes, we can proceed with our operation. In that case, you can use R, either this or this. In that case, you can go with R. That depends upon your requirement. And next one is not. Rather than writing, if A is not equal to B, I can write like this. Not A is equal to B. Okay. So that gives, if it is true, it gives false. If it is false, it looks for true. Okay. So this is something about logical operators. So later let's see more about it when we discuss statements in C#. Okay. So but ultimately just do remember that. So whenever you want to concatenate or validate multiple conditions at a time, so there you would be needing these logical operators and, or, and, not. Any questions, guys, so far? Next, incremental or decremental operators. Incremental or decremental operators. So this is not a operator, this is a kind of concept. It will reduce some complexity, it will reduce some burden on the developer, but it's not a operator like your plus, minus, into and division. This is a kind of feature provided in many programming languages. Okay, for example, there is a variable called a is equal to 10. So what is the value of a? 10. I want this to be incremented with 1. How do you write it? A is equal to a plus 1, right? If you want to add 1 to that existing value, how do you write it? A is equal to a plus 1. Then what will happen? So what is the value of a? 10. Now we are adding 1 on top of that. So finally the result is going to be 11. So what C# is saying, rather than writing this complete statement, better make use of the short form, that is a plus plus. So when we talk about plus plus is a incremental operator. Here a plus plus, if you write a plus plus, here a plus plus is nothing but a is equal to a plus 1. So wherever you need to write any variable like this, like x is equal to x plus 1, or y is equal to y plus 1, z is equal to z plus 1, wherever the value needs to be incremented with 1, so don't write this complete statement. So rather than writing like this, better make use of your plus plus incremental operator. If you just write a plus plus, which is nothing but a is equal to a plus 1, this will reduce some complexity. Next, decremental operator, minus minus. Here also same story. Wherever the value needs to be decremented with 1, like in one of the scenario, I want this value to be decremented, subtracted with 1. So in this case, how do you write the statement? A is equal to a minus 1. So rather than writing this full statement, you can make use of this short form. Simply you can write it as a minus minus. A minus minus is nothing but a is equal to a minus 1. Any questions, guys? That you can write. That is a concept I was saying. A plus plus or plus plus a. Plus plus a is also nothing but a is equal to a plus 1. But if you write it in the loop, one will be incremented before the action, one will be incremented after the action. But ultimately, that is going to be added with 1. Okay, good. So we have covered almost all basics in C#. Okay, now let's start building some examples, basic examples in C. Okay, so let's start learning how to build a simple example in C#. So as I said, we are going to learn all C# concepts under console environment. So in order to implement anything in the console environment, first you need to be aware of the structure of console application. What is there in console application and where to write my logic, where to write my program. So you need to be aware of structure of console environment, console application. So let's move towards the next concept, that is structure of console application. C. Irrespective of technologies, it is a .NET, Java, or any technology, every application, it is a Windows based application, web based application, mobile application, or any application, every application requires a starting point. When it comes to compiler, your application may have some thousands of classes, thousands of files, thousands of functionalities. But compiler doesn't know anything about your environment. It doesn't know where to start the execution. Let's say in C, we used to write main program, right? In C editor, you can write main program, and apart from main program, outside of the main program, you can write thousands of functions. If I remove main program from C and compile it, what will happen? There is a C program which contains one main method and thousands of subprograms. I just removed main program from that environment and just compile it. What would be the outcome of that? Will it be executed successfully, or does it throw any error? What is the expected output over there? What kind of error? Okay, it throws an error. See, as I said, in C editor, there are thousands of functionalities, but your compiler doesn't know anything about those thousand functionalities. If you remove the main program, so what will happen once you compile your application? Compiler doesn't know where to start the execution, because main program is the starting point of your C project. Outside of main program, you can write thousands of functions. Compiler doesn't know anything about it. It always maintains address of only main program. It knows only about main program. Once you compile your application, immediately it will go to main program, and whatever is mentioned inside the main program, it will take care of executing only those instructions. Let's say outside of the main program, there are 1,000 methods. If you don't specify anything about those methods, nothing will be executed. It will never go to those methods, those environments. Whatever is mentioned in main program, only that thing will be executed. If you don't specify anything about your program, that will not be executed, because main program compiler always maintains address of only main program, because your main is the starting point of C application, C project, C product. If you remove that starting point, so what will happen? Again, it will start looking for main program, but main is not there in the environment, so it doesn't know where to start the execution. That's why it throws the error saying that starting point is missing. So like C, every project, irrespective of technologies, whether it is .NET, Java or anything, every project requires its own starting point, which will be used by your compiler. Once you compile your application, immediately it will go to that starting point. From there, it will start the execution. That's why if you remove that starting point, it doesn't know where to start the execution. That is the reason your application will not be compiled. It throws the error saying that your starting point is missing. So starting point is mandatory for every project, every type of project. It can be web, Windows, console or anything. So every application, every software, every project requires its own starting point in order to proceed with the further execution. Okay, so like this, when you talk about a console application, console project, yes, our application also requires a starting point. So what is the starting point over? So here also the starting point is going to be main program. Here also the starting point is going to be main program. Okay, so let's see how the structure looks like. When you talk about console application, whenever you select any console project, any console application, every console application by default, it comes with one default namespace. In the last class, we have discussed the hierarchy defined inside a library, right? Once again, I'll repeat that. What is a library? A library will have collection of namespaces. What is a namespace? A namespace will have collection of user-defined data types, collection of classes, collection of structures. What is a user-defined data type? It can be a class, it can be a structure, it can be interface. But when you talk about user-defined data type, it will have collection of variables and subprograms. A variable can be called as data member. A subprogram can be called as method or member function or method or member function. So basically, whenever you want to group set of data members and set of member functions, set of variables and set of subprograms into one place, then you'd be needing a container. The container is going to be a user-defined data type. A user-defined data type can be a class, it can be a structure, it can be interface. So later we'll see more about it. But as of now, just do remember that what is a class? It's a kind of container. What is a structure? It's a kind of container. It will act as a container for collection of variables and subprograms. Whenever you want to group set of data members and member functions, then you would be needing a container called user-defined data type. There are set of user-defined data types, set of classes, set of structures, set of interfaces. Now I would like to group all my user-defined data types, all my structures, classes, and interfaces into another big container that is going to be your namespace. A namespace is also kind of a container where you can group set of user-defined data types. There are set of namespaces. Now I want to group all my namespaces using another big container, which is going to be your library. So when you talk about a library can be defined as collection of namespaces. A namespace can be defined as collection of user-defined data types, like collection of classes, collection of structures. And when you talk about a user-defined data type, it can be defined as collection of data members and member functions. Okay. When you talk about structure of console application, by default, every console application comes with one default namespace. It looks like namespace and namespace name. What is namespace name? It is a user-defined data type. You can give any name. You could also give your name, right? So by default, your project name will be considered as namespace name. But if you want to change it, you can. It can be changed. But by default, your project name will be considered as namespace name. Namespace name, beginning of the container, end of the container. Beginning of the namespace, end of the namespace. What is the namespace? It's a kind of container where you can place collection of classes, collection of structures, collection of interfaces. So namespace, beginning of the namespace, end of the namespace. So inside this namespace, as I said, you can place collection of classes, collection of structures, collection of interfaces. It allows you to define a number of classes, a number of structures, a number of interfaces. There is no limitation. Basically, the nature of namespace is it is going to act as a container, a group for collection of user-defined data types. Okay. Now we know that inside this namespace, we can define a number of classes, a number of structures. But by default, this namespace comes with one default class that is called class program. By default, it will be provided with one default class that is called class program. But apart from this class, you can place a number of your own classes. But by default, this namespace will be provided with one default class. When you talk about a class can have a number of methods, a number of data members. A class can have a number of methods, a number of data members. By default, this class will be provided with one default method. By default, this class will be provided with one default method. Apart from this method, you can have a number of methods in the same class. But by default, it comes with one method that is nothing but starting point of your application. That is nothing but starting point of your application, which is called main. So within the same class, you can have a number of methods. Within the same namespace, you can have a number of classes. But when it comes to compiler, it always maintains address of only main program. It knows about only main. It doesn't know anything about all your classes, namespaces, and other methods. Once you compile your application, immediately it will go to main program, and whatever is there in the main program, it will take care of executing only those instructions. Outside of main, you can define a number of methods, a number of classes, but it will never go to any method. So once it is mentioned in the main program, then only it will go to the respective method and finish the execution. Okay, so your main is nothing but starting point of your console project, console application. So that's why if you remove this, it will start looking for main program. If the main program is not available in the execution environment, it doesn't know where to start the execution. That's the reason it throws an error. So this is the structure of console application. Any questions, guys? No? Very good. Now we are aware of all basics. We know how to define a variable. We know how to perform a operation between two values, right? Now we can start building simple examples in C#. Okay, so I'll show you how to write a simple example. Okay. Once you have installed Visual Studio in your machine, and you'll be getting a symbol like this, the reverse 8 symbol. This is a symbol of Visual Studio. Okay, so you can choose it from either your programs or you can select it from here. Okay, go to file. If you want to develop a new project in .NET environment, so once you open Visual Studio, here what is Visual Studio? We used to call it as Visual Studio .NET. Do you think Visual Studio .NET is only one software or these two different softwares? See, these two different softwares. See, every technology would be needing a development environment. For example, HTML. Where do you develop a HTML web page? That can be developed anywhere. You could also develop HTML web page in Notepad. Notepad can also be used as a development environment for your HTML program. You could also develop your HTML in any editor. Where do you write a Java program? There are so many development environments available. You can write it in Eclipse somewhere and somewhere, Ultra Edit and somewhere. Right? So your Notepad is going to act as a development environment for HTML. So when you talk about Visual Studio is different from .NET. .NET Framework is a separate software. Then what is the relation between Visual Studio and .NET? Visual Studio is an IDE. IDE means Integrated Development Environment. Visual Studio is providing environment for .NET application development. We also have other IDEs available in the market. Webmatrix, Mona organization is also providing some IDs. When you talk about Webmatrix, there also you can develop .NET applications. But Webmatrix is providing environment for only web application development, not for all applications like console and Windows. Visual Studio is the only one which is providing environment for all types of .NET applications. That's why it has become very popular. But other organizations are also providing IDs for .NET development. For example, if you want to develop .NET under Unix and Linux, yes, you can. Mona organization is providing environment under Unix and Linux operating systems. A .NET application can also be developed under Unix and Linux using Mona organization IDE. So there are many IDs which are providing environment for .NET application development, but Visual Studio is more user friendly and which is targeting all types of .NET applications. So that is the reason. So Microsoft is providing very good support to Visual Studio. That's why it has become very popular. But remember that Visual Studio .NET. So Visual Studio is an IDE. So your .NET is actual framework. Okay. So whenever you want to develop any .NET application in Visual Studio, once you open your IDE, Visual Studio IDE, go to File, select New. Here you can see many options. Project, website, team project, file. Forget about all these things. Later we'll see. Let us focus on only that first option, that is project. Select project. Okay. See, as I said, as of now, we have 4 different programming language support provided in .NET framework. Right? What are those? C Sharp, Visual Basic, F Sharp, and C++. See, if you want to develop your applications in VB.NET, select Visual Basic. You'll see all these applications. As we discussed, these are all different types of applications of .NET. Console, Windows, Web, and MVC. If you want to develop your application using C Sharp, select your backend language as C Sharp. If you want to develop your application using VC++, select it as Visual C++. Right? So we are going to develop all our applications using C Sharp. That's why select it as C Sharp. And the beauty of Visual Studio is, see, when it comes to MS Office, let's say I have installed MS Office 2007 in my machine. If I need to work on legacy versions of MS Office, I want to go back to some MS Office 2003 and 2000. In this case, what has to be done? You need to install those versions explicitly in your machine. Otherwise, you cannot work on it. But the beauty of Visual Studio is, if you install a latest version of .NET, it targets all previous versions. You don't have to install any legacy version. If you want to go back to 2.0, yes, you can. If you just select it, only 2.0 features will be visible here. If you need to develop your project under 3.0, yes. So it targets all frameworks. That is the beauty of this. You can work on any version of .NET. Okay. Okay. So when you talk about Visual Studio, it targets all frameworks, all versions of .NET. You can work on any legacy version except 1.0 and 1.1. Except 1.0 and 1.1. Those are the first version. What is the first version of .NET? .NET 1.0. That is called .NET 2000. Microsoft .NET 2000. The first version of .NET has been introduced in 1998. That is .NET 1.0. And the second version of .NET has been introduced in 2002. That is .NET 1.1. So those two versions are not available here because those are legacy versions. If you want to migrate any .NET 1.0 and 1.1 application to higher versions, you need to rebuild each and every library in the newer version. It cannot be directly migrated to higher versions. But from 2.0, any project can be directly migrated to any one of these higher versions. That's why yet they haven't provided the support of 1.0 and 1.1. Okay. So here 2.0 is, which is nothing but Visual Studio 2005. The first version is Visual Studio 2000, which has been introduced in 1998. The second version is .NET 1.1, which is nothing but Visual Studio 2003. It has been introduced. The beta version has been introduced in 2002, and the original version has been introduced in 2003. And the next version of .NET is 2.0. 2.0 is nothing but 2005. It has been introduced in 2005, in the year of 2005. And next version is 3.0. This has been introduced in 2007. And next version is 3.5. This has been introduced in 2008, in the year of 2008. Next, .NET Framework 4. This is one of the advanced version of .NET. It contains advanced features, advanced technologies. It has been introduced in 2010. So Visual Studio 2010 is nothing but .NET Framework 4. Next, from there, for every 2 years, Microsoft is releasing one new version like 4.5, 4.5.1, like 2012, 2013. Now we are in 2015, and 2016 is also ready. Okay. Okay. So you can select any version for your console application. Now, as I said, these are all different types of applications, technologies available under framework. As I said, we are going to implement and execute all our C# concepts under console environment. So if you want to develop any console-based application, console-based project, select your application type as console application. Console application. And if you go to bottom of this dialog box, here you can see this is your project name. Project name. You can give any name. Let's say my first console app. And where do you want to store your project? Just browse and map it. Okay, if you already created any folder, just browse and map it. Otherwise, if you just select this option, it will create a new folder with the name my first console app, and it keeps all your files inside this folder. Okay, so add to source control, this is different. Like, when it comes to real-time applications, so we'll be using some version control to maintain the history of changes of all files of your projects. There will be a central repository. Your application will be kept there in the central repository, so that it can be shared by a number of developers. Once you make any change in any file, the history will also be tracked. Okay, so when it comes to real-time application, there will be some different types of version controls to track the history of the changes of the respective application. So the most popular version controls are TFS, Team Foundation Server, Visual Source Safe, SVN, PVCS. So there are different types of version controls available in the market. So later we'll see. Nowhere it is related to your code. Okay. Once it is done, just say okay. See, so this is the environment of console. See, as I said, give me a second. Is it visible now? Okay. So as I said, so this is the structure of your console application. This is the structure of your console application. So as I said, by default, every console application will be provided with one default namespace. The name of this namespace is going to be very similar to your project name. By default, your project name will be considered as namespace name. If you want, you can change it. And within this namespace, you can have a number of classes, a number of structures, a number of user-defined data types. But by default, it comes with one default class, that is class program. And by default, when you talk about a class can have a number of methods, but by default, it will be provided with one method that is nothing but starting point of your application. So outside of this class, you can write a number of classes, but your compiler doesn't know anything about it. It always maintains address of only main program. So once you compile your application, immediately it will go to this respective method. And on the right side, this is called Solution Explorer. What is a Solution Explorer? This is a place where you can see all your projects and project related files. What is your project name? My First Console App. Every project by default, it will be provided with three things: properties, references, and one C# file. What is the extension of C# file? .cs. These are the default things. But apart from this, you can add a number of folders, a number of files, a number of things. But by default, every console application will be provided with these two things. What are those? First one, references, right? See, as we discussed in the last class, whenever you write console.read, console.write, console.readline, console.writeline, compiler doesn't know anything about it, right? So in order to make use of those functionalities, what has to be done? The complete reference has to be provided under your programming environment. What is that complete reference? You would write something like system.console.read, system.console.write. So every time you'll have to write something like system.system.system. So what is a system? System is a library. We have a DLL called system.dll. So in order to make use of all functionalities of that respective library, so what has to be done? First, that library has to be added to your application. That is called reference. Microsoft has already done this. Microsoft has already added few libraries for you. If you're looking for any library other than this, which is not listed here, okay, because your system, your environment doesn't know anything about system.dll, right? That is the reason the system library has to be added explicitly into your programming environment. And in order to make use of that, so that has to be imported into your programming environment. We already discussed this. How to import a namespace. Whenever you want to import any namespace, you would use a keyword called using system. It will take care of importing this namespace into your programming environment. Now whatever is there inside this namespace, you can start reusing them directly. So whenever you want to reuse any third-party library, any functionality of third-party library, so first what has to be done? First you need to add the reference of that library. How to add it? Right click on references, select add reference. Here you can see add reference, add service reference. So later we'll discuss about add service reference. As of now, just focus on add reference. Here you can see, set of .NET libraries. These are all system-defined libraries. A system-defined library is called as base class library. So these are all base class libraries of your .NET framework. If you want to add any reference, just select that particular library and say OK. The reference will be added to your application. Okay. So later we'll see more about this going forward. Okay. So do you remember that if you want to make use of any third-party DLL in your application, if you want to reuse the functionality of any third-party DLL in your application, so what has to be done? First, you need to add the reference of the third-party DLL, then import that DLL into your programming environment using keyword. Okay, so Microsoft has already done that on behalf of you, just to reduce some burden on the developer. So what they are doing, so whenever you select a console application, so whatever is required to start with your basic program, so they have already done it. They already added a few references for you, like system.core, system.data, and system.dll. Okay, so if you're looking for any library other than these, which are not listed here, just go ahead and add reference of that particular library. So this is something about reference. And next one is property. Here you can see a file called assemblyinfo.cs. As I said, whenever you want to share your code with the third-party people, if you share your code as it is in the original format, so what will happen? They can steal your logic, right? Let's say MS Office. Is Microsoft exposing their source code anywhere in any one of the application? Java is open source, Linux is open source, Unix is open source. You can go there and see the source code of Linux, Unix and everything. But can we see the source code of any Microsoft component? No, you will never expose his code. You will never expose his code, right? So whenever you don't want to expose your code to the third party, in that case, you have to build your code in the form of a library. If you want to share something with third party, if you want to provide security to your code, your logic, if you don't want to expose the original logic of your code, then what has to be done? It has to be built as a library and it should be provided in the form of a library. A library is nothing but an assembly. Yesterday we have discussed two assemblies while discussing about the access specifier. A library can also be called as assembly. Yes, you can see assemblyinfo.cs. Assembly information, it means a library information. So after developing your code, let's say I have developed set of reusable functionalities and everything. If you want to share this code with some third party people, so what has to be done? It should be built as a library. So if you're going to build your code as a library, there you need to mention set of properties about your assembly, about your library. What is your library name? What is the company name? What is the version of your library? Do you want to use any key? For example, MS Office. If you want to install it in your machine, you would enter the key, right? Initially they will build that product with using some private key. And whenever you install it, you'll have to decrypt it using some public key, right? If you don't enter that key, it will not be installed. So you can also use same kind of mechanism while sharing your library with third-party people. So those things can be mentioned over here. So this we will see later when we discuss about custom library implementation. But remember that, so when you talk about properties contents, assemblyinfo.cs, which contains information related to your assembly, your library. So as of now, you don't need to worry about it. Okay, and the next one is program.cs. By default, every console application will be provided with one C# file, that is program.cs, so which contains the starting point of your application. But apart from this, you can right click on this and add a number of files, add a number of classes. Okay, but by default it will be provided with one default class, that is nothing but program.cs. So this contains starting point of your application. Any questions, guys? Okay, so if no, so it's already 8:09. Yeah, thank you. So from next class onwards, from tomorrow, we'll start writing some basic example, because since we are aware of the environment of console application, we are aware of input and output statements and some basics like operators and all. So now we can start learning of how to build a logic. Okay, so from tomorrow onwards we'll start building. We'll be concentrating only on programmatical parts. Okay, tomorrow it is going to be very interesting. There I'll let you know how to write, how to build logics based on different requirements.